What's up, guys? Today we're going to be showing you a podcast we recently got to film with a friend of ours named Michael Oard. Now, Michael Oard is a creation scientist, and he's been studying creation science for the past 50 years. He's written many books and has published several articles discussing every topic from Noah's flood to the post-flood ice age and the effects of that all the way up to the present. Today's topic is the age of the earth. Where did these ideas of millions and billions of years come from? How do they determine these ages in the present? And are these ages valid? We hope this blesses you guys. Today we're talking with Mr. Michael Oard about the age of the earth. Mr. Michael Oard, how are you doing today?
I'm doing quite well.
All right. Mr. Oard, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, my background is atmospheric science. I got a master's and bachelor's in it from the University of Washington. And I've been in creation research in earth sciences for 50 years. And my specialty is the ice age, but based on that, because everything's interdisciplinary, that's where I first learned some geology. And from there, I been reading and learning about geology for 50 years. And so that's my background. And I've written numerous books and articles I've published in the creation science literature. So that's my background, essentially.
All right, so we're going to be talking about the age of the earth. Where did the idea of these vast ages of earth history come from?
Well, they came from the intellectuals of the Enlightenment, starting in the 1800s, who threw out the Bible. The culture at that time believed the biblical worldview. They might not have lived according to the Bible very much, but they still believed that the earth was young, about 6,000 years, and there was a global flood and there was creation. But that changed with the Enlightenment, who ended up throwing out the Bible and rejecting Christianity, sometimes for good reason because of all the abuses of the church at that time. They threw out the baby with the bathwater, essentially, and with no anchor in Genesis from the Bible, they had to figure out, well, how did everything get here? Like most people want to know, how did we get here? What's our purpose? So they said, well, we got to be scientific. Everything has to be based on man's reason. Of course, the problem with that is man's reason doesn't reason very well, as history shows. But anyway, that's what they said. So what do we have? Well, we have present processes going on, like erosion and transport by rivers and deposition and those sorts of features we see going on. Hurricanes that will spread a lot of sand maybe from one area to another. We have volcanic eruptions and stuff like this. So these are the present processes we will use to explain all the rocks and the fossils in them. And that was developed in the late 1700s, actually. And it didn't really become strong until the early 1800s. And then when they looked at everything and say, like the walls of Grand Canyon had to form by a process we see today, like maybe a shallow sea or a river delta, of course it'd take millions of years. And suddenly, millions of years were suddenly in there automatically, almost overnight. So that's how the millions of years got in there from the scholars of the Enlightenment.
So, Mr. Oard, what is the method and or methods by which scientists determine these ages of millions and billions of years in the present?
In the present, well, the bias came in around 1800, and so they assume the Earth is old, and so there's a lot of ways to measure the Earth. Anything that changes with time could measure time. So they used things like the thickness of sedimentation as saying millions of years would need to be formed. That volcanic areas would take a long time, and valleys. They looked at a lot of deep valleys and said, oh, it'd take a long, long time for that little river down there to erode this. So those are the rough things they had to kind of back up their time scale. But it wasn't until in the early 1900s when they discovered radioactivity and that's what they use at present. It was kind of rough at the start, but about the 1950s, 1960s, they settled on the uranium-lead method mainly. And from there, the Earth became billions of years old from these methods. And so since then, they've developed many radiometric dating methods of various types. Potassium argon being another one that was started right away. And rubidium strontium is another very popular one. And they have less popular ones they use for maybe various aspects of Earth science. But that's what they use now.
Now, Mr. Oard, is it true that radiometric dating is based on rather questionable assumptions?
Yes, indeed. In order for you to get a radiometric date from a rock, you have to know with the initial amount of the parent and the initial amount of the daughter. The parent is like the uranium. The daughter is what it changes into, like uranium to lead. And so you'd think they'd start with 0 because they date the time the rock cools. And supposedly it becomes sealed in a closed system, so nothing can get in and out. That's one of their main assumptions. But we know that that's false because water can move in and out of rock. And some of those elements they use are very water soluble, like uranium is dissolved in water pretty easy. That's why we have to mitigate for radon in our basements, because the uranium leaks out, and one of the decay products of uranium lead is radon, and so that's why we have so much radon, because it's a leaky system. And but they have to know the initial amount of uranium, initial amount of lead at the very beginning, and they got to assume a rate of change has been the same. The rate they measure today has been the same for millions and even billions of years in the past. So those are the three main assumptions for radiometric dating. But each dating method has its own peculiar assumptions added on to that. Like uranium, lead, they always measure lead, and they believe it started with the original lead that was in the solar system. So it's based on the fourth assumption in the collapse of the dust cloud to form the solar system. It's the nebular hypothesis. So they have to assume that hypothesis also. But other methods have their own peculiar assumptions other than the big three. The big three, summing up, have to know the initial conditions. It has to be closed for millions and billions of years with nothing going in and out. And you have to have a constant rate of decay for millions and billions of years. Those are the three big ones.
Now, scientists have claimed that they can verify these radiometric dates via multiple lines of independent reasoning.
Yeah, they claim that.
But if something overturns their radiometric dates, let's say a fossil is found that shouldn't be where it is, those radiometric dates are thrown out in favor of something else. Yeah,
they throw out a lot of dates. I have several quotes from experts saying that if the radiometric dates don't agree with the fossil dates that they set up in the 1800s and early 1900s, they throw out the radiometric date, assuming that that's an error. So they throw out a lot, and a lot of radiometric dates don't agree with what they expect. We don't know how much, because this is all done in the lab, and we're not privy to what they throw out. So we don't know how extensive it is, but we kind of feel that it's probably fairly extensive, but we don't know for sure.
So am I correct and say that 95% plus of all the dating methods give younger dates than they say?
Yes, there's many dating methods, and most of them give ages far younger than they expect, mainly from radiometric dates. For instance, one change with time is the decay of soft tissues. And we know that the decay is usually in the thousands of years. And And so anything with soft tissue should be just thousands of years old. But yet they find soft dinosaur tissue, and they find soft tissues in other organisms almost clear through the geological column. And so why haven't they decayed away under, and it doesn't depend on what the heat or the pressure. They should be gone in thousands of years. So that's one chronometer. Another is the decay of short period comets, which is one of my favorites. There's long period comets that we only seen once in history. They're very elliptical. They go around the sun once and go way out, probably around Neptune. Short period comets, they make an elliptical curve around the sun and out to about around Jupiter within about 200 years. And the thing about comets is that tail is the loss of matter. Every time it goes around, it loses matter. And these comets are like dirty snowballs. They're loosely bound gravitationally. And a lot of times the material between the solid rock substances is ice, maybe carbon dioxide ice, maybe water ice, some other ice. So they're not bound together too tightly. So they're losing a lot of matter every time they go around. So you can say, well, after maybe 40 revolutions, they should have all disappeared. And so, but the fact that we see a few hundred of them still indicates that the solar system is young. But then the conventional scientists will say, well, maybe there's a source of short period comets somewhere, either in the Kuiper belt beyond Neptune or what's called the Oort cloud that supposedly orbits well out beyond the solar system, and so a star will perturb these, they believe, and send them into the solar system. But getting an elliptical order like that is a very difficult problem for a body coming into the solar system. It's very precise, difficult. Most of the time it would be hyperbolic, going into the sun and being shot out of the solar system. So, but the thing is, we have no evidence of any new ones coming in, and we observe them disappearing. Like, for instance, was it comet Hale-Bopp, was it, that hit Jupiter? As it was approaching Jupiter, it broke up and into several pieces and hit Jupiter one after another. And we've seen comets disappear in the telescope, break up. And a lot of those meteor showers that we see at various times of the year we're going through the tail of a comet that disappeared in the solar system. So we observe them decreasing. We don't see any new ones, and they can't last more than, it's rather uncertain how long they can last. Some say 10,000 years, some said 50, but we're into tens of thousands of years at the most. So that indicates the solar system is less than 10,000 to 50,000 years. So that's one of my favorite and fairly easy to understand and grasp. So there's a lot like that. Dr. Don Batten of Creation Ministries International has listed, I think, about 95 of these that give young ages younger than they expect.
So are these methods that they put out based on assumptions like radiometric dating?
Oh yeah, every dating method has assumptions. You got to assume that, like with the decay of short period comets, that they'll decay at a certain rate going around, and you got to assume what that is, because a lot of times you don't know what that rate is. Maybe it's 1% of the comet disappears each time, so you got to kind of assume that. But that's a pretty good assumption, whether you say 5%, 1%, 0.1%. The main information on that is that within a certain amount of time, in tens of thousands of years at most, it's a maximum, we will have no short period comets. But the fact that we have a lot of short period comets indicates the solar system is less than a few tens of thousands of years.
So, Mr. Ord, in regard to Christians who try to fit the millions and billions of years of the secular worldview into the Bible, can these ages be fit into the Bible?
Well, they attempted it clear back in the 1800s, before evolution. And the reason they even attempted it is because their attitude was the scientists are objective people and should their knowledge should be factual, even though they don't understand what science is. Science is actually about the present, observations. Stuff about the past is interpretations of present-day scientific evidence. They didn't understand that, and they trusted these people, so they said, the millions of years must be factual, so we have to fit it in the Bible somehow. We're not going to give up the Bible, which is good that they didn't. But they tried to find ways to fit it in. So one of their popular one was the day-age theory, saying the days of Genesis were long periods of time. That was one popular method at the time. The problem with that is that in Genesis 1, when he describes the creation in 6 days, it's very specific. It talks about the first day, the second day. They have numerical adjectives. And there's an evening and morning the first day. And when you compare the use of these adjectives with the rest of the Old Testament, it comes out that it's always used for a literal 24-hour day. So from the Hebrew point of view and exegesis, it doesn't work. It shouldn't work, but they forced it anyway because they believed that the millions of years were totally factual, which was their main problem. Then they came up with another ingenious idea that's saying that, well, there was a gap in time between Genesis 1:1 and Genesis 1:2 or 1:3, somewhere in there. There's a little variety in the gap theory. And so they put the millions and even billions of years now into that. So you had your whole history of the dinosaurs, the geological column, all go through there and attributed the earth was destroyed because of, and they blame it on Satan. And then he's recreated in 6 little days. So that was the most popular one among evangelicals. And that way they can get rid of the whole controversy without even thinking about it or getting involved and just not worrying about it, which is why it was so popular among evangelicals who still like to keep the 6 literal days. But that's a gap of 4.5 billion years now, which is rather a stretch. Also, they tried to change some of the usage of the Hebrew words in Genesis 1:2 and 1:3 to make it sound like there was a recreation, like Genesis 1:1. And says instead of the earth was without form and void, it says the earth became without form and void. And that's Hebrew scholars say that's an unjust translation of the words. Besides, in Exodus 20, Exodus 20, I forgot what verse it says, that the Lord God, right in the Ten Commandments, it says the Lord God made the heavens and the earth and all that's in them. That's day 1, Genesis 1:1, and the rest of Genesis 1, in 6 days, and he rested on the 7th day. So that does not have a gap in it. And so you can eliminate that. And another proof text I use for the day-age theory is it's in 2 Peter 3, where it says, a day is with the Lord as 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is a day. So they say that's kind of a formula we can use for Genesis, the days of Genesis. But if that was the case, we just add another 6,000 years. Yeah. And that doesn't mean anything when you're talking about millions and billions of years. So besides, the verse in 2 Peter 3 implies that actually says God's outside time. That's what it really means. And so you can't really apply something from the New Testament, which is actually a quote from the Old Testament too, back to the days of Genesis, just does not apply logically. So all their attempts distort the Bible. And when you start distorting clear verses, you're in trouble, because you can do that with a lot of other verses in the Bible, which history shows they have done.
Are there any ways in the Bible that we can determine the age of the earth biblically?
Oh, yeah. Well, God was the only one there, so let's go with what he says. And yes, see, those nice genealogies in Genesis 5 to 11 that make great bedtime reading. You can just add up the time there, and you find out that Adam was created somewhere around a little more than 6,000 years ago now. And people have said, well, that maybe there's gaps in those genealogies. Well, if there are, it's not going to add too many years, first of all, so it's not going to really solve the problem. And some say, well, that was the creation of Adam back then, but there might have been this huge gap between the original creation and Adam. Well, there's a little problem with that, in that actually Jesus and Paul referred to the creation, indicating there was no gap there, which is actually another evidence against the gap theory, in such things like when he was defending marriage, I think Mark 10:6, have you not heard that in the beginning God created the male and female? In the beginning. And there's other verses say at the beginning there was tribulation, and you have to have people for tribulation. So people have been around since the very beginning of creation. Paul says that in Romans 1:20, for ever since the beginning of creation, his invisible attributes and his divine power are clearly seen in what is made from the beginning. So there have to be people there to observe this in the beginning of creation. So both Paul and Jesus indicate there's no gap between Adam and the creation.
So, Mr. Ord, would you agree that compromising the Bible with secular worldview undermines the gospel?
Oh yeah, because it undermines the Bible. And if you can't take clear verses the way it's intended, and you make up stuff, I mean, who knows what you can make up then? You come up with anything. That's why people say you can prove anything from the Bible. Well, if you don't use the rules of interpretation, you can. Mm-hmm. And so that undermines the clear message of the gospel, which is in the Bible. But a lot of people don't think about it that deep. And so they accept Jesus, which is great, but they kind of don't deal with those things in their mind. They kind of shut them out, ignore them, and move on. But logically, it does undermine it, but they don't really know it. And so there's a lot of people in that category.
Yeah.
So it really does undermine the gospel, but still the gospel can be preached and they can become Christians no matter what. Yeah. But eventually if they're logical, they're going to meet the issue head on, and then they're going to have probably a crisis of faith or something like that.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome.
Well, I hope you guys enjoyed that. Please like, share, and subscribe, and please leave a comment down below because we'd love to hear from you. Thanks for watching, guys.